You are listening to Ideas and Leaders podcast. I'm Elena Paweta, Executive Communication Coach and TEDx organizer. With each episode, I'll share with you communication tips and ideas from top business leaders to help you excel in your career. Welcome to the next episode of Ideas and Leaders podcast. Today, my guest is Dr. Michelle Johnston. She's a management professor, executive coach, and a leadership expert. And Michelle recently published her new book, The Seismic Shift in Leadership: How to Thrive in a New Era of Connection. And I would love to speak about this change in leadership that is going on right now. Hi, Michelle. It's great to have you on Ideas and Leaders.
Hi, Elena. I'm so happy to be on Ideas and Leaders, and welcome to your audience. Thank you so much for having me. I'm calling in from New Orleans, Louisiana, and we are about to begin our Mardi Gras. So our parades are about to start rolling tomorrow night for a straight 2 weeks. So this city is just giddy.
Okay, really nice. So, Michelle, you tell us something in the beginning. Tell us something more about yourself. So, I know that you are a professor at the university and you're also a coach. So, what is your career story?
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, I don't know if you all use the same terminology, but one of the phrases we use here is a corporate brat. And I guess it's based on a military brat. Have you heard that language used before? Yeah. So I was raised as a daughter of a corporate leader. And back then, in order to be promoted, they would transfer you, or, they didn't want you to lead the same people you were just on a team with. You were peers. So my father was really good with his job at General Motors in the insurance and then the finance division. So we moved every 2 years growing up. So I was born in Washington, D.C., and lived in Maryland, New Jersey, Michigan, Tennessee, Florida, Alabama, Georgia. And then he finally retired in South Carolina on a beautiful lake. So what does this have to do with my career story? Well, I think as a child, whether if you're in a military family or in a corporate family that moves all the time, I became really fascinated with people and how to adapt to different cultures. Although I didn't get to go to beautiful places like Poland, it's certainly when you move from the north to the south, you're experiencing a different culture. And I was fascinated by that. And my family, my mom was a great corporate wife, and we had dinner every night together, waited for usually an hour and a half for my father to make his long commutes from New York City or Detroit. And we would sit down as a family and most likely more times than not talk about General Motors and his leadership and how he motivated teams and what the culture was like. And it was a tough culture back then. That was a culture of just say what I do, don't ask any questions. I'm really not going to show that I care about you. And they certainly didn't listen. And so General Motors did get into trouble based on the fact that they just weren't listening to customers and ultimately had to declare bankruptcy, and our government bailed them out. So that really, those things moving around a lot, and me as a kid being fascinated by interpersonal dynamics and cultures, and then my father's rise in leadership. And then I had a grandfather who had a PhD in economics from Georgetown and was an author of books and believed that he went on a letter writing campaign when I finished my undergraduate degree. Michelle, you need to get a graduate degree. Michelle, you need to get a PhD. Michelle. And so I think all three of these influences obviously impacted my career. And so I did ultimately get a PhD and entered academia at Loyola University. I've been there for over 20 years. I'm a professor of management and I teach in the College of Business. I also, because of my father, I really wanted to work with businesses. I didn't just want to teach it. I wanted to work with businesses and help change. And so I worked with a consulting firm. And then when I lifted my head up after getting tenure at Loyola, you publish or you perish, right? So you really have to put your head down for a number of years to publish in order to get promoted to that tenure position. And once I did that, I decided I really wanted to be an executive coach and help leaders improve their communication. And I was doing that for a number of years, pretty successfully, I thought. And then I realized, oh my goodness, some of the leaders that I was coaching who had been using the very popular command and control kind of authoritarian leadership style were getting pushed out of organizations. And Elena, that's when I had my aha moment, because I never really imagined myself a business book author. But I had this kind of lightning strike moment that I had to get the word out that there's a seismic shift happening in the world, and that command and control and authoritarian and jerk boss and toxic cultures and is no longer going to be effective with this next generation. And I wanted to be a part of that change and that movement.
Yeah, that's the very interesting story, because you're combining your scientific research with your observations as a coach. And I'm very interested about your book. So what is this shift that you are describing in this book? And so what is going on, and how can we adapt to this?
So when I started so I had that seismic shift moment, right? That I realized that the command and control, that authoritarian leadership style, where the communication was much more just transactional. I, as the leader, am just going to tell you what to do. And it's all business. And I'm not going to show that I care about you as a person. I'm going to do most of the talking. I'm going to do most of the directing. Work is work. And you have a personal life and have a full life at home, but don't really show up talking about that. I mean, it was a very, old school style of work, and very goal oriented and results, which you still need to be goal oriented and results. But what I was learning and seeing is that the leaders who were truly succeeding in motivating, communicating, attracting, and retaining this new generation, and this is pre-pandemic, the leaders who were succeeding were truly connecting with their people, showing their people, I care about you. I care about you more than just the results you bring. I care about us as a team. Let's create a team. I want to get to know you. I'm not going to do all the talking. I want to listen too. I want to create a culture, not of fear, which is what the command and control culture created, fear. And so the new leadership style, whether you were a man or a woman, was much more about connection. So once I realized that the seismic shift was all about connection, then I had to figure out what that looked like, sounded like, felt like, acted like, because I didn't think I was great at that. I had been brought up in command and control. So I would walk into the classroom, boom, 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 boom. I was action-oriented, results, accomplishment. I was an achievement junkie. I have some of my colleagues in the College of Business laugh at me to this day, because they're like, oh yeah, we'd walk into your office and you'd look up and you're like, I got things to do. Good to see you. Bye-bye. Like, I was not the embodiment of meaningful connection. And yet that's what I was finding out. So I was curious too, like, what do these leaders do? So I went and I interviewed 18 leaders from around the world. I started here in New Orleans with the leaders that I coached. And I started there and asked questions about connection, disconnection, what are the levels of connection? And then after each interview, I said, can you think of a leader right now who embodies this concept that I can interview? And that's how I found my leaders. And so it took me on Zoom around the world. And so I had this book, and I was so excited, and it was ready to go, The Seismic Shift in Leadership, in March 2020. And all of a sudden we're on lockdown. And I called my publisher. I said, we cannot publish a book that is all about connection when now the entire planet is disconnected. Because at that point, what I had done in my book was make the case that, yes, this is the command and control was the way that it worked for decades and decades. It no longer works. We need connection. but now we're disconnected. So I said to my publisher, Advantage as the publisher, thank goodness they allowed me the entire pandemic to go back, interview those same leaders and said, okay, whoa, now how do you connect in the hybrid world? How do you connect when you don't see each other? And I think, Elena, that is why my book it's not even a year old yet. I have a toddler, and it was launched last February, and so almost a year. And I think that's why it became a global bestseller. Number one, because of timing. We were all coming out of the pandemic feeling so disconnected, and I had the research to show how to be connected. And that's the number two why I think it's a global bestseller, is because I had the research to show, okay, here's what you do. We can do this.
Yes, it is really interesting how it all changed overnight when the pandemic started, and we just did not have any tools for connection. So as you're saying that connection is the most essential skill of a leader, but if we are online, what can we do? So what cases do you have in your book? Maybe you can give us a couple of examples to inspire our listeners. How do those leaders actually connect with their teams in the situation when you just don't have a possibility to meet very often?
Right. I'll give you two examples that contrast each other. So I have I'm going to not be specifics to not throw these people under the bus, but I'm working with a company that I think still operates like we have our meetings in person. So this is not Loyola. This is an outside company. So I will show up on a Zoom meeting, and this company is in charge of the Zoom meeting, and it will be a 4-hour Zoom meeting. And they're just talking at us. And there's no opportunity for breakout groups. There's not even anything on the schedule for a lunch break. And we're just sitting there with our cameras on being talked at. That does not work anymore. And you can't just conduct business as usual on the Zoom. So you can't look at communication as transactional. I'm a leader. I'm going to show up on Zoom. Elena, good to see you. Here's what we're going to accomplish today. Okay, bye. You have to embed time for connection. If you want to get results in this hybrid environment, in this virtual environment, you have to embed time. It's got to be deliberate and intentional to build trust, psychological safety, get to know each other, our stories. We have to know each other now, I believe, personally as a full human in order to get business results. So the other example is Juan Martin is the global president of Kind Bars, the Kind kind of granola healthy bars, KIND. And he was one of the leaders who I interviewed for my book, and he's become a good friend. And I had him recently on my podcast. I said, okay, Juan, wow. Because he's from Spain, and during the lockdown, he was in Spain with his wife and 2 small children. And he didn't even have an office with a door that closed, because I think they got stuck in Madrid because they had this gorgeous home in New York City, and Mars owns Kind Bars. And so their corporate offices in New York, well, he was in Spain. So we would have these interviews. And of course, he, like you, was on a very different time zone than me. And his kids would be coming in, and he handled it so beautifully. And he would say, even though we were conducting business on a call and I had all these specific interview questions, he would say, Michelle, how are you? And he would lift up his espresso cup and he'd say, let's just catch up for the first 5 minutes and then we can get down to business. So I remember all of that happening, that first of all, Juan Martin, the global president of Kind, was kind, thank goodness. Number two, he demonstrated that he cared about whoever was on the other end of the Zoom. He cared about them as a person. And number three, he showed that he was human, that he had a life and he had kids coming in. He didn't apologize for it. He's like, this is the way we're working now when we're working from home. particularly at lockdown. So fast forward. So I just had him on my podcast a couple months ago. And I said, okay, I'm sure you're glad to be back in New York City. And he said, absolutely. I said, so what has changed? How do you connect now when everyone is still at home? He said, well, our employees at Mars have told us that they do still want to work from home Mondays and Fridays. So we have revamped our offices so that on Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, he said, Michelle, just like my home where I was on lockdown in Madrid, I don't even have a door to my office. We made it a collaborative space so that when our team members come in, it is about face-to-face collaboration. And when they're home on Mondays and Fridays, they can sit behind their computer all day. They can have the flexibility. They can get up and pick their kids up from carpool. They can, do a load of laundry. They're telling us that they still want some flexibility. And we're saying, we hear you, we respect you, and we still want you to come in the office if you live in Manhattan. And we're going to make it collaborative and team. And I said, okay, so you're the global president, though. What about all the people who don't live in Manhattan? And once again, he lifted up his espresso cup. And he said, Michelle, I'm a European at heart. I love my espresso. My people know that if we have, whether it's a 30-minute call, it's an hour call, the first thing we do is we have a cup of coffee together and we don't talk business. And I want to know about their kids. I want to know about their weekends. And then we talk business. And I think that is his secret sauce of why he's so successful.
It sounds amazing. I mean, I would love to have such a boss to have a cup of coffee and talk about children and for some time. But, I think that in business, there is this issue that people very often, they just don't have time. And okay, they know in theory that, okay, I have to build relationships. I have to ask, how are you? But in the end, we have a goal. We need to achieve this goal as fast as possible. We have a deadline coming up in a couple of hours. Just let's do it. And don't you think that in practice, it is hard to actually do those things?
Yeah, I've caught myself many times as well. Like, okay, I got stuff to do, right? Good to see you. I'll ask questions about you next time I see you, right? I mean, we all do. We're humans. There's a lot to accomplish, particularly in the business world. But what I have found is that connection, first and foremost, drives well-being. So if you are a leader who really, you care about your people and their well-being, right, you're going to embed at least 5 minutes to connect with them, because well-being is at the forefront right now. We can't ignore how a Harvard study just came out, the longest study they've ever conducted since 1938. They've been pulling data, and they have found that 300 million adults are unhappy. They feel lonely. And yet there's one thing that all of us can do that helps with our well-being, and it's having a meaningful connection. And when I say have, that's too passive. Initiating a connection with somebody. And they said it doesn't even have to be in your inside circle. It could be with an Uber driver. It can be with your mail person. It can be with somebody at church. But just intentionally once a day, making a connection with somebody, because what we're finding is we're all feeling so disconnected still. And as social beings, we need each other. So if you're listening, your listeners to this podcast are thinking, okay, but I have so many goals to accomplish. If you can just put in the back of the head, in your head, that in order to accomplish all those goals, you do need to instill time to build that trust and safety with one another, because then they're more likely what we have found is they're more productive as humans, and they're more likely to take risks, which drive innovation. And what drives financial performance but innovative ideas? So all these things are tied together. So even if you're thinking on this podcast, well, I care about my people, but well-being is not going to make me spend that much time with them. But if you think about it's going to drive your financial performance, then I hope that you'll take 5 minutes just to do check-ins. I do a lot of speeches right now, and I try to make them engaging and interactive. And so the last speech I gave, I said, okay, share at your tables, what is a best practice for a connection on Zoom? How do you connect on a personal level? And one of the women raised her hands and stood up and took the microphone. She said, it's as easy as take 10 to check in. Just remember that, take 10 to check in. She said, I go around and I ask my people, whether it's in person or it's on Zoom, I ask my people, how are you? How is our team? And what can I do to support you? She said, that's my job. And just go around and then you get a pulse check of each person, right? Each person, their well-being, how their team is, and then what I can do to help them. So it's just little things like that, Elena, that's the shift I'm talking about. We need to be intentional with connecting before you get down to the results. You're going to get more from your people.
And don't you think that we can't only be those kind leaders who care about those people, but then we are kind of letting go and being too flexible, and then people feel that they can do everything, they can do anything. So there, don't you see this risk of being completely opposite type of leadership, or do you think that we need to find this balance?
I think balance. You are absolutely right. I think it's balance because we still need accountability. Yeah. We still need results. And you as the leader have to figure out how to articulate the goals and get the buy-in, right? Articulate that strategic vision. Here's why you're a part of this. It's more than you and us together. It's a bigger strategic vision. You matter. Your contributions matter. And here's what I need from you by the end of the quarter in order, because it used to be your paycheck is your reward. And now what we're asking our leaders to do is, yes, you need to reward your people with a paycheck, and you need to make sure that they actually want to come to work, because then they'll be more productive and get you the results you want. So it's more of this holistic view as showing up as a full human, and seeing your people as full humans and showing that you care about them. I'll give you an example. I had one of my girlfriends, her husband runs a big company, and he came up to me, and he's just this lovely, lovely person. And he did not have a smile on his face. And he came up to me and he said, Michelle, I read your book. I said, uh-oh, that didn't look good or sound good. He goes, I realized I'm doing everything wrong. Will you help me? I said, of course I'll help you. Yes, yes, yes. He said, I realized when one of my guys came in the office last week, he's holding up his phone and he had this look of fear on his face. And I immediately thought, oh gosh, we lost a customer. One of our machines went down. But instead, he runs over to show me that his child, who just turned 1, was taking his first steps, and he was like so scared at the same time but so happy, and he wanted to show me. I said, that's awesome. He goes, no, because I think, Michelle, you're telling me I have to remember that guy has kids next week that just learned how to walk. And I said, that is exactly what I'm telling you.
Yeah, that's a very good example. So we need to actually be interested, in our teams, in other people, know about their families, their children, and to be interested in this. So what else can we do? Let's give our listeners some calls to action. So you mentioned being interested in other people, spending some time asking questions. What else can we do to actually build this connection?
Yes. So what I learned in my research is that there's 3 levels of connection. The first level is connection with yourself. And so that's really spending time reflecting, knowing who you are, what your strengths are, what your superpowers are, being able to bring those to the table, create a diverse team with people who don't have your strengths, right? Who can help you with your blind spots. So that's a lot of that connection with yourself, is really owning your journey and not hiding pieces and parts of yourself, just being really comfortable in your own skin as a leader so that you can show up and people trust you because you're real. Another part of connection with yourself is giving up perfection. Because we've all now gone into people's homes, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. People have seen and heard dogs and babies and kitchens and bedrooms. And I mean, we're now trying to still work from home. And so you can't pretend that you're just your professional self. we're full humans that have lives. Okay. So that's connection with yourself. So give up perfection, own your journey, and know who you are so that people trust you. Then you go to that level 2 connection, which is the connection with your team, which is what we've talked about a lot on this podcast, Elena, is just strategies to connect on a meaningful level with your team. Then level 3 connection is with your organization. And I'll end with this. Here are some takeaways. What I have learned is, in order for your people to feel connected with that organization, which is what you want to retain them and to keep them engaged with the work they do, you need to have rituals and traditions. So do you have an annual service day where you go build a house together? Or you might go, it's a fundraiser that you do a 5K walk together. Do you have some things that you do as a team or as a company together outside of work? Do you have a Christmas party? The same gentleman that I was referring to, he said, now you're telling me I have to remember that my guy has a son that just learned how to walk. He also said, do I have to have the Christmas party? And I said, yeah, I highly recommend that Christmas party, because those annual rituals, traditions, events, again, that are not just about work, but that include the work people, make your people more engaged and committed. So I have a leader that I coach, and he said, Michelle, I would love to bring people over to have a Christmas party. We could have like a cookie competition. He heads up IT for a big hospital system. I said, that's a great idea. He said, but my last boss at a different company said that I wasn't allowed to bring people to my house, that you had to keep personal, and professional. I said, throw all that advice out the window, because that's not applicable anymore. The way that you're going to build buy-in and commitment and engagement and retain your people is that, yes, once a year, have them over for a Christmas party or a cookout in the summer. That's how you create belonging together. So make sure your company, that you are, having those rituals and traditions that are bigger than each of the people and that bring people together meaningfully.
Great. Thank you so much, Michelle, for all of those tips. I'm sure that our listeners took something out of it and made some notes what to do and what not to do. So, Michelle, if our listeners want to reach out to you to ask some questions or just to connect, where can they find you online?
Absolutely. I would love to hear from your listeners. Just send me a note. You can go to my website, www.michellekjohnston.com. That's Michelle, the letter K, and then my last name, JOHNSTON.com. And I have my book and all of my podcast and just information. But most importantly, there's a way to contact me. So send me a note. I'd love to hear from you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Michelle. It was a pleasure having you on Ideas and Leaders. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Elena. You were a brilliant host. And thank you to all of your listeners. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you for listening to Ideas and Leaders podcast. Did you enjoy this episode? Let me know that you listened by tagging me in your LinkedIn profile and using a hashtag Ideas and Leaders. See you in the next episode.